Online for Authors. I'm chatting with Amanda DuBois, author of Unshackled. Welcome, Amanda.
Hi, thanks for having me. This is so fun.
Yes, I'm super excited to have you. Before we really jump into the story and some of the storyline, can you give readers like a quick elevator pitch as to what they're going to find when they open up the cover of Unshackled?
Well, the first thing they're going to find that I'm really proud about is that this book is about moms in prison. And on the very first page, there is a quote from a woman who is a mother who is actually in prison in the state of Washington, who read the book. And what she said in her quote, I wish I could remember the whole thing, but she says, Camille Delaney, who's the protagonist, is the attorney that every mom in prison wishes she had.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's good. Yeah, that gave me goosebumps because this book is raw.
Yes.
But before we really get into that, I want to know why mysteries, because you write mysteries and this is a series. So what made you decide when you were going to write that you were going to kind of go into the mystery section and do a series?
Okay, well, this all just a long question, a long answer. I'll try to be short. This all started about 20 years ago when I'm a lawyer. And I was a medical malpractice trial lawyer. And while I was doing that, I was a nurse before I was a lawyer. So then I became a lawyer and I ended up in this legal system that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And it was really frustrating. And so I thought, there's so many things about the system I didn't like. And the thing that I hated the most was that when I was a nurse and a patient comes into the hospital or something, everybody has the same value. You don't try to make a judgment about the person in front of you. Fast forward to the law system, ain't like that. When a person comes into the legal system, we're going to value them based on, if they die or if they get injured, they're going to have a value based on their ability to earn money. And that never sat right with me because I had been a nurse and I thought all people are valuable. So I decided that I wanted to tell people about that. And I thought, I'll write an article. And I'm like, nobody's going to read a dumb article about the value of human life. And I thought, well, maybe I'll write a book, like a novel, like a fiction. And
right.
But then because I'd been a lawyer and I'd been involved in all these crazy malpractice cases, I'm like, well, it has to be a mystery because you have to figure out what happened. So I didn't start writing because I wanted to be a writer. I started writing because I wanted to communicate something to people in a way that they would hear and maybe be a little more interested than just picking up a newspaper article or something.
That's really interesting because I find that I do a lot of the same things. Like all of my books touch on some kind of a societal issue, racism, xenophobia, those kinds of things. And people can read them without judgment.
Without an agenda.
They don't have right. And so they can just read it. For instance, if I were going to have a conversation with someone about racism, before long, it's going to turn ugly. And people they're going to have their opinions. They're going to dig their heels in. Names are going to be thrown about. Someone's going to come out looking like a racist, whether they are or not. It's what happens, right? Mm-hmm. But when you put it into fiction, now all of a sudden it's something that we can all look at and digest because we're doing it alone. Well, and so you have a similar approach in that idea of, look, we've got this prison system that we need to talk about.
Exactly. And I just read something the other day and it really struck with me. It was it talked about kids not reading anymore as much as they used to. And this person was saying that one reason why we should read when we're young is it builds empathy, because when we read a book character, we develop empathy for that character. And I thought that's exactly why I write, because I want people to have empathy for moms in prison. In this particular book, Unshackled. And I thought nobody, this is a forgotten population. It's kind of like what you're saying in racism or something. Like people don't think they want to read about racism, but they want to read a good book about somebody doing something. And by the way.
Right. And I write historical fiction. And so it's wonderful because people can read about racism and it doesn't feel like I'm preaching to them in any way, because this is a past thing, except that it's not. Yeah. Racism still exists, right? But they don't feel the same.
And they have empathy for the characters. And
yes.
So if you don't know a person, in my world, I have a lot of friends who've been in prison, but most people don't.
So
they don't really know about what's going on with moms in prison. But when they read a book then they have empathy for those characters, and then they feel like they know one, and then my mission has been accomplished because I've got my readers to be empathetic towards book characters, which are really based on what's really happening in the world. So I hear you.
Right. So what I love is Camille Delaney, who is your protagonist. She is you, because she was a nurse that became a lawyer, and so you kind of like, how much more of you is in that character?
Well, I think if I had it to do over, I started writing like 20 years ago, and then I did never publish the books, and then I updated them during COVID and started publishing them. It might not have been quite so autobiographical, but honestly, I think if you know any author, you can see so much of them in there. Mine's just a little bit more in your face but you write what you know, and I wanted to write about, and really there's a thing that, like, having been a nurse brings something into the law that most lawyers don't have, which is this sort of level of compassion and humanity. Right. And I wanted to have a lawyer character who had the compassion and humanity of a nurse, so that she could go care about the people that she was working with in a different way than a lot of lawyers care about people. So it made sense. But yeah, it's pretty autobiographical, or like down to the office.
Well, I love that, because I do the same thing. People say to me, well, are you in any of your characters? And it's like, I'm in all of them, me as I am, me as I was, me as I hope to be, me as I hope I never will be, all of those things, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. What is Camille's motivation to keep doing what she's doing? Like, what kind of pushed her on this path to go from being, a nurse to now a lawyer to now really looking into societal issues?
Well, so she was a nurse, which is obvious. Everybody's got the caricature stereotype of the nurse who cares about everybody.
Right.
Then you go into the legal world, and you start off by caring about people, and then you do it for so long, and you still care about people, but then you get kind of caught up in the whole law, which is super interesting, and it's like a puzzle. And then you sometimes forget that there's people on the other side, ish. And so I think for her, it was like being a nurse, getting into the legal system, kind of getting sucked into that, and then sort of having this wake-up call, like, wait a minute, I'm a compassionate, warm-hearted, loving person who cares about people, and I better start using the law to further my personal agenda of humanity than using the law as a gotcha type. Like a lot of people in the law, they do it as an ego thing, like, I want to win the case so I can be on the front of a magazine and say I won the case, not I want to win the case because my client needs justice.
Right. And this is not an indictment against lawyers, guys, because there are good lawyers out there. I'm not saying that, but you're right. I think in anything that we do, it's very easy to get caught up in end results and forget about the people that are involved.
Exactly. And and everybody who's a lawyer says that they care about their clients, and I'm not saying that they don't, but there's a certain amount of ego involved in.
Right.
Honestly, you kind of have to be, because you're, like, I spend all day getting beat up by other people, and you can't do that if you don't have like a strong sense of what you're doing, what you're doing, and it's right. It's a very weird, really weird to go from being a nurse where everybody loves you to being a lawyer where it's like, ew. Yeah.
Which is why I went back and said, look, we're not lawyer bashing. I mean, this isn't what it is. But yeah, there is that sense of, like, I would definitely invite a nurse to lunch, and I'd be a little more hesitant to say that about a lawyer, just because you were wondering, like, what is their motivation behind this?
Mm-hmm. And so for Camille, it's like she was the nurse, then she became the lawyer, and then because that, what makes you want to be a nurse is this sort of inner sense of caring and compassion and love, and, wanting people to have their best lives. And you forget that sometimes in the law. And for her to come back to that, as a lawyer who can then use the nursing skills to make a difference.
Right. I love that. So this book kind of touches on some big issues. We've got the OxyContin crisis. We've got addicted prisoners, so people who go to prison addicted, and the total lack of help and care to get them through the addiction and to help them through on the other side. We have female prisoners who lose access to their children. all of this obviously came to your attention at some point, and you decided, I've got to get this in a book. Tell us a little bit about that, the backstory to this story.
Okay, well, here comes another float plane. Can you hear that?
Yes.
Not unlike Camille Delaney, my office is on a lake where there's a float plane like landing pattern. Anyway, well, here's what happened. I was lawyering along, and I'm sort of a privileged white lady lawyer, and I own a law firm, and I do divorces for rich people, and I'm having this sort of experience of learning how to run a law firm. And now I just am celebrating my 30th year as a law firm owner, which makes me one of the longest standing women-owned law firms in Seattle. So I'm super
wow, proud. Fantastic.
Anyway, about 10 years ago, I ended up writing this series of little short books. It was like law for dummies, like how to rent an apartment and how to be a good employee and what to do if you get in a car accident. And through circumstances that were just, life circumstances, I ended up teaching it to a group of people that had recently come out of prison. And I didn't know anything about the prison system because I'm a family law lawyer. I'm not a criminal lawyer. And they were like taking notes and listening, and they were very engaged in this conversation. And finally, one of these guys raises his hand and he says, this is so helpful, and we're so glad that you're here. And I thank you so much for telling us that there's one problem. And I said, well, what's the problem? And he goes, well, we're all felons, and we can't get a job, and we can't rent an apartment. So you're kind of putting the cart before the horse. And so then they started teaching me.
Yeah.
And I had no idea of what happens to people. First, I didn't know anything about prison, and I certainly didn't know how people struggle when they get out of prison and how difficult it is for them all getting a job, getting a place to live. Like they are set up for failure one after the next. And one of the things I ended up learning is what happens when moms go to prison. And I didn't realize that, for example, when a mom goes to prison, when a dad goes to prison, the child usually stays with the mother if there's children. When a mom goes to prison, they rarely stay with the father. They either go to grandma or some relative, or they go in foster care.
Foster care. Yes.
And so by putting moms in prison, and to back up from it, most women don't go to prison because they woke up one morning and decide to rob a bank. They go to prison because of trauma related. Most of them are survivors of sexual assault. Right. Most of them have had horrible, awful childhood experiences. And what they do is, because they are not lucky like we are, and they can go to a psychologist and get some kind of medicine to help them, with their depression, they end up somewhere along the line getting, on illegal drugs and
self-medicating.
And I've had women tell me that the first time I took meth, I felt safe for the first time in my life. And I just was like so relieved, and I felt safe and comfortable. So then they get addicted, and then they do property crimes because they have to support their habit, and then they end up in prison. So they're not bad people, they're trauma survivors. And then we take their children away from them, and then we put their children over here in a system where, they're going to go into foster care, which is a pipeline into, it's called now, they used to call it the school to prison pipeline, but now they call it the trauma to prison pipeline. So they put their kids over in the trauma to prison pipeline, and then all of us are around here saying, why is there so much crime, and why is our streets so unsafe? And I didn't know it, but I started, because I was a nurse, public health, you always go upstream, right? Like, there's a problem. And it all kind of came to me. I mean, it's not like I'm a genius. Like, it's not, people know this, but I didn't really understand. It's like, oh my God, we're putting all these kids in a situation where we pretty much can guarantee most of them are going to, end up in some kind of trouble. And the statistics about foster care is, like 75% of girls coming out of foster care are pregnant within 5 years, and 50% of them end up in, it's bad. And so anyway, so I learned all that stuff. And because I had written those other books about the medical malpractice world and how screwed up the law is around that, I'm like, well, okay, Camille's going to have to go down to the women's prison and, illuminate this problem for everyday readers.
Absolutely. So you want everyday readers to understand the problem. What else do you want everyday readers to do when they're done reading this book? Because when I got done reading the book, I wanted to do something.
I'm so glad you said that.
No, I did. I wanted to do, I didn't know what. I have no idea what I'm, as a white woman who lives on the coast of North Carolina, who's never seen pretty much the outside of a prison, let alone the inside of a prison, who has zero friends who've ever been in prison that I'm aware of. If they've been in, nobody's telling me. And I wouldn't even know where to start. And yet I still felt very compelled that like something needs to be done. And what does that look like?
Well, first I'm going to push back on the question about if you ever know anybody in prison, not necessarily in prison, but did you know in our country, 1 out of 3 people in our country has some kind of criminal record that impacts their ability to get jobs and housing?
See, I didn't realize that. So the likelihood is I do know someone, but I'm unaware of it.
Right. So but that's part of what it is. I mean, part of what I hope people take away is to destigmatize that, so that if you happen to do have a friend or a family, not family member probably, but somebody in your world that has
Right.
some sort of criminal background, that we should be more accepting of that, and it should be more like welcoming these, especially women and men too, because I've got a ton of friends. Now I started a nonprofit that teaches formerly incarcerated people how to lobby for policy change. So now I've got, lots of friends and sort of kind of like almost like children in a way, like this huge family of people that have been in prison, and I've learned so much from them. But I think the one thing that I am hoping people take away is, like, for example, they need jobs.
Right.
And if you are a person who is in a position to hire somebody, you shouldn't be afraid to hire a person with a criminal record. My law firm, I have something like 30 employees, and any given time, there's probably 3 or 4 that have been in prison at some point. Right. So I affirmatively recruit for people that have a criminal record, because I know how hard it is for them to get a job, and I know how loyal they are, and I know what good workers they are. So there's different ways in the world that we can start to destigmatize,
right,
the idea of somebody who's come out of prison. And even, people that come out of prison, they basically, for the most part, my experience, and there's some that are just career criminals, and we all know about them. But
but that's a whole different. That's like, I dealt a lot with homeless population for a while, and there are some chronically homeless who aren't looking to be homed, and then there's everyone else.
Right,
and they're the people whose husbands lost their job because of an illness, and now they're living in their car.
Exactly.
Right. And so it's so I understand what you're saying. So we're not talking necessarily about the perpetual criminals, but we're talking about people who, for most likely because they were sexually abused as a child and they ended up on drugs trying to self-medicate, who then did something stupid and got put in jail and are now coming out, and they're clean and they're trying to reintegrate into society.
Right. Let's welcome.
What can we do? Right.
Let's welcome them. Let's, be aware of, like, hiring practices. And if there's a vote in your community, like Seattle passed a statute, not because of my little nonprofit, which is changing all the laws of the state of Washington, which is a riot. There's legislation that comes up regularly. Should people be able to vote? Like, just try, when you see legislation or you see a politician who is, and this whole hard on crime thing, like, let's rethink that. I mean, not talk about, like, I'm just like, when people say, I want to be tough on crime and get these criminals off the street, let's think a little bit about who they are. And is there a better way that we can get them off the street, but like,
maybe let's redefine what we mean by criminal.
And let's redefine what we mean by prison. Like, if all the women in prison, like when I go into the women's prison, and if I would say, how many of you have been raped or sexually assaulted, probably 85-90% are going to raise their hand. Well, is that really the best place for that woman to be? And isn't there maybe a different option or alternative? And if some policymaker in your community is suggesting that, or some advocacy group in your community suggesting maybe a different alternative, maybe we should think a little bit about that before we just say, no, I want the criminals all locked up.
Right. And I think why I'm saying is redefine criminal too, is we need to think about, was this more or less a petty crime because someone was addicted? And if so, what can we do about that addiction?
Right.
And then going back a little further, can we figure out why they got addicted in the first place, and can we help there too?
Exactly. And that's the upstream thing. And so
few people just one day say, hey, I think I'm going to try drugs, get very addicted, and then turn to crime. There's a reason that people are turning to the drugs.
Exactly.
And are we addressing that? And and I know it's very bad in the community that you're talking about, but it's not even necessarily easy for me. Like, my health insurance often says, no, you don't need it. You don't need mental health care, or you can have mental health care, but you can only have this amount of mental health care, or all of those things. And so you take that and then you multiply it by people who don't have health insurance at all. And so they have zero chance of getting in. And then they stick them in a system in which, how often do they get health care? I mean, mental health care.
Don't even get started on that. But the funny thing is, inside prison that I didn't realize, first of all, I want to say the increase of women in prison over the past 15 years has gone up by 500%.
That's crazy.
So we're going completely the wrong direction.
Right.
But one thing that I have found really sweet in a funny way, the women that are in prison, they are very supportive of each other. They build families in there.
Yeah.
And they get into, they have recovery groups, and they really work hard and to build lives together inside and to support each other. And then when they come out, so many of them are like, I'm not forgetting my sisters that I left behind. And so a lot of them end up either in the recovery community on the outside or doing some kind of nonprofit work on the outside, or it's a family, and it's a commitment that they make to each other. So I think there's so many misguided impressions about people that are.
So that just made me think about something in your book where someone had gotten out of prison and they were essentially breaking their parole because they were talking to people who had gotten out of prison, and they're not allowed to do that. Is that a real law?
You're supposed to. No, it depends what state you're in, but
okay.
In a lot of states, most states, I think, the other thing they can't do, they can't go into public housing. So I had a friend, and he was in prison for, I think maybe 15 years or something. And he's this big black guy, I'm going to just say it. And if you would see him, and he was saying the scariest night of his life was the night he got out of prison, because he had no place to go. And his grandma said, come stay with me, but she's in public housing, and she gets kicked out of public housing if she has a felon in the public housing. So once you start realizing all of the places where they're stopped,
right.
It's kind of overwhelming. So yeah, they're not supposed to hang out with each other, but those are their people, and those are the people
that they've made their friends with. Those are the people that they've had their support with. Those are the people who've kept them clean. Now they're out. It's scary. They can't get a job. They can't get their kids back. They can't do all of the things, and they're not allowed to have their support group anymore.
Yeah. So I would say, if you're circling back to what any of us can do, watch for the policy groups that are working on that and support them. Because a lot of people, like this organization I started, Civil Survival, out here in Washington, we work to change policies in their state legislature. And I think they've changed 15 laws now. I mean, it's been big, huge, changing the way that fines are imposed on people in prison. And what happened is, when I started this organization, Civil Survival, I had this idea that that if legislators could hear what I hear, these compelling, heartfelt stories, they would change the way that they treated people coming out of prison. And what I realized pretty quickly is there's no lobby of former prisoners. There's a lobby for Boeing and Microsoft and Amazon.
Right.
So I basically created a lobby of former prisoners. And I helped them to get organized. And they now go down regular. And now there's ones in different parts of the state, but there's a whole organized group of people who we taught
show up for these,
and we teach classes in this is how to talk to a legislator, and this is how to tell your story, and this is how a bill becomes a law. And we have these workshops that teach people how to change policies. So I guess if you're somebody looking for some way to make a difference, it's find out if there's an organization like that in your community. And this is helpful to me because at the last end of the book, I said I'm starting a nonprofit called Unshackled, and of course, I've never gotten around to getting it all done because I'm too busy. But I think it's really it's tough out there financially, and there's organizations that are working to help these people, and they need volunteers, and they need donors, and they need support, and they just need to feel welcome.
Right. I agree. So, guys, the book is amazing. And if you're just in it for a good story, you're going to get a really good story. But you're going to be hard pressed to walk away with just a good story, because you're going to come away going, oh my gosh, what can I do? I didn't know that. And the number of pieces of information that I learned and then was totally appalled by.
I know, I try to weave them in there, so because people are like, "Oh, this book sounds like it's just a bunch of statistics," and I'm like, "No, I tried to weave it in."
It is woven in, and it doesn't feel like you're being, bombarded, but yet you walk away with just a really good, strong, at least basic understanding now of some of the craziness that's going on that we call justice, and And it's like, is that really justice? What is justified about a child who is never going to see her mother again because the mother was essentially forced to sign away her rights while she was in prison? And the reason that she was forced to do that is because she wanted to try to give her child the best that she could give her.
Well, and just think about it this way, and I have a scene in the book, and that's because it came from a real friend of mine, but you think of a little girl, and she's living with her mom in an apartment, and her mom might have a drug problem, but she's a pretty good mom. And, the little girl loves her mom. And one day the little girl comes home, she's like 6, and she comes
and the
home
mom's
from
gone.
school, and the mom doesn't come home. And the neighbors don't know what to do because the little girl's sitting outside, and it's now 10 o'clock at night. The little girl's sitting outside the apartment crying. So they call the police, and the police come get the little girl. The little girl gets into foster care, but because the mom can't make bail, which is a whole nother issue, which is, put a pin in that because I don't talk about that. The mom can't make bail. And then the mom ends up, she can't make bail, so she gets convicted, and she goes to prison. But from the little girl's perspective, my mom
she's just been abandoned.
What did I do to make my mom leave
Exactly.
me? And we don't, the police don't, when they pick up a kid, they don't, or they arrest the mom, they don't say, do you have a child, or can we help with this? And even if they do, the mother's going to not want to tell the police because they're not trustworthy. So, I was just going to think another thing that I see a lot is there's lots of funds that help moms with bails. Like on Mother's Day, there's a big bail bond, like you can donate to organizations that bail out moms who are stuck in jail. Because first of all, you get arrested and then you go to jail waiting for your trial or you're negotiating your plea. And that's the time when people we talk about that. I mean, we hear about that all the time. People that get stuck in jail for a long time while they're waiting for either a trial or something. And they could get bailed out, but they don't have the resources. So there's some organizations that you can donate to that are specific
help with that.
To bail moms out of prison. So there's all kinds of stuff out there that you can do, which I'll try to forward to you, and you can post.
Fantastic. I'll stick things in the show notes. That would be great. So I just got to know, Amanda, what is next? Are you going to keep writing, or are you done?
No. I'll keep writing. I'm thinking about what's next. I shouldn't tell anybody. I'm kind of thinking about a TV show, and I'm kind of working on that a little.
That would be fun.
Wouldn't that be good? Because I think Camille she'd be good. Don't you think she'd be a good series character?
I do.
So I have like a screenplay coach, and I'm learning. I'll tell you something. Writing a TV show is way different than writing a novel.
Yes, so it's interesting. I've had a few people say about a couple of my books, so that would make a great, like movie or whatever. And it's like, I don't even know how do you turn that into a screen? Yeah,
I'm learning, and it's like I've got this really good screenwriting coach, and I have a producer that I got connected to who actually has been in prison, so he's really committed to this project. But it's it's like a total crapshoot, like who gets a TV show made. But
but the other thing is that it's so different because like so many of my scenes, we've got all this inner dialogue going on. You can't have any of that in a TV show, right?
Problem. It's all got to be. That's what they're always telling me. And you get it's like they have these beats. So when you write a TV show, in one TV show, there's something like 45 beats, and every beat is 25 beats, and every beat is 2 minutes or something. Yeah. And you have to put all this activity in there, and it can't be any inner dialogue. So it's really different. So it all has to. I
can't even imagine. Yeah.
It's hard. It's really different. So I'm trying to learn that. So I was going to write another book, and then I thought I can't do that at the same time I'm trying to learn this because I get too mixed up because I can't.
Oh yeah. I can't do two things at once. That's not going to happen.
So but I've got a million other Camille Delaney stories because it's such a rich, she's a good character to go around and, people.
Right. And you've seen a lot. You've seen a lot of your own stuff. And so you have a lot to draw from.
Yeah.
So fantastic. So, hey guys, if you want to continue this conversation, head on over to Novels and Latte Book Club on Facebook. And there you're going to have an opportunity to win a digital copy of Unshackled. So just tell us something that you liked or learned while listening to this podcast, and you will be in the drawing for that. So tell me, Amanda, if someone wanted to get up with you, talk with you about this book, talk with you about how they can help others, just talk with you maybe about your organization, how do they do that? How can they find you?
So I have a website called amandadubois.com.
Okay.
I have LinkedIn. I think it's Amanda DuBois author, and all that social media stuff. But I have this newsletter that I'm doing now where I'm you'd like this. I'm interviewing a lot of my girlfriends who've been in prison, and I do these interviews to sort of show people, the transformation that happens
Yeah.
for
Oh,
women
that's great.
out of prison.
That's great.
And so you can sign up for that newsletter and you can respond, then you get the email and you can respond to that. And I'm pretty good at checking email on that because, like, as you can tell, this is more, I'm not like, I didn't write books to be an author. I wrote books to like get
It's
a
a
message.
passion project. Yeah. It's something where you want people to know things.
So
Fantastic.
if people are interested in helping these women or these issues and stuff, I'm 100% in. So
fantastic. So guys, definitely take a look at the show notes. There'll be a lot of things there for you to interact with, and definitely run right out, grab Unshackled. If I remember correctly, Amanda, some of the money that is raised from Unshackled, you're using toward
100%.
100%.
100% of the money that comes from any of these books goes into social justice projects that help mostly people coming in or out of prison.
Fantastic. So not only are you going to get a good book, but you're actually going to help a good cause and you're going to learn a lot. So definitely run right out, grab Unshackled. Amanda, thank you for being with me today.
Thanks for having me. This was so fun.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.